Hello, Professor Dawkins. How are you? I'm Ben Stein. I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
You have written that God is a psychotic delinquent invented by mad, deluded people.
No, I didn't say quite that. I said something rather better than that.
Oh, well, please tell us what you said. Please tell us what you said.
Well, I would have to read it from the book.
No, please.
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
So that's what you think of God?
Yeah.
How about if people believed in a God of infinite lovingness and kindness and forgiveness and generosity, sort of like the modern day God? Why spoil it for them?
Oh,
why not just let them have their fun and enjoy it?
I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. I write a book, people can read it if they want to. I believe that it is a liberating thing to free yourself from primitive superstition.
So religion's a primitive superstition?
Oh, I think it is, yes.
So you believe it's liberating to tell people that there is no God?
I think a lot of people, when they give up God, feel a great sense of release and freedom.
Why do you think that? I mean, what's your dad? What's your scientist? What's your dad?
I think, well, I've had a lot of letters saying that, and I've...
There are 8 billion people in the world, Dr. Dawkins. How many letters have you had?
No, I haven't done that. That's quite true.
Professor Dawkins seemed so convinced that God doesn't exist that I wondered if he would be willing to put a number on it.
Well, it's hard to put a figure on it, but I mean, I put it as something like, 99% against or something.
Well, how do you know it's 99% against, say, and not 97%?
No, I did. You asked me to put a figure on it, and I'm not comfortable putting a figure on it. I think I just think it's very unlikely.
What? But you couldn't put a number on it?
No, of course not. No.
So it could be 49%.
Well, it would be. I mean, I think it's unlikely, but it's quite far from 50%.
How do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I put an argument in the book.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right. How did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No. Nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto, perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
So the Hebrew God, the God of the Old Testament, he doesn't exist in your view?
Certainly. I mean, that would be a very unpleasant prospect.
And the Holy Trinity of the New Testament,
nothing like that.
Do you believe in any of the Hindu gods? Like Vishnu?
How can you ask such a question?
You don't, right?
How could I? I mean, why would I, given that I don't believe in any others?
You don't believe in the Muslim God?
No. I mean, why do you even need to ask?
Well, I just wanted to be sure. So you don't believe in any God anywhere?
Any God anywhere would be completely incompatible with anything that I've said
I assume.
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure you don't believe in any God anywhere.
No.
What if after you died you ran into God? He said, "What have you been doing, Richard? I mean, what have you been doing? I've been trying to be nice to you.
Yeah.
I gave you a multi-million-dollar paycheck over and over again with your book, and look what you did."
Bertrand Russell had that point put to him, and he said something like, "Sir, why did you take such pains to hide yourself?"
But if the intelligent design people are right, God isn't hidden. We may even be able to encounter God through science, if we have the freedom to go there. What could be more intriguing than that?
Hey, what's up, guys? Tuesday News here, Shane Manners here, and we are here talking about Dr. James Tour, a professor of chemistry, computer science, and material science, and nanoengineering at Rice University. The guy is decorated. He has written over 590 research publications and over 100 patents. Guy is serious. Anyways, in his most recent paper, a 12,000-word essay titled Animadversions of a Synthetic Chemist, he tackles a question that has puzzled scientists for millennia. And that question is, where did life come from? Interesting question. Basically, he writes, and I'm quoting here, life requires carbohydrates, nucleic acids, lipids, and proteins. And he says here, biologists seem to think that there are well understood prebiotic molecular mechanisms for their synthesis or for their creation, but they have been grossly misinformed. Now, it says here, few biologists have ever synthesized a complex molecule ab initio, meaning from the beginning. If they need a molecule, they purchase molecular synthesis kits, which are, of course, designed by synthetic chemists and which feature simplistic protocols. Polysaccharides, their origin. The synthetic chemists do not have a pathway. The biologists do not have a clue. And basically, they have no idea where life came from. That's the conclusion. They don't know where life came from. They're saying it came from nothing, but it really does nothing. Can life really come from nothing? Come on. Anyways, the last line here, it says the basis upon which we as scientists are relying is so shaky that we must openly state the situation for what it is. It is a mystery. And that's exactly what it is, friends, a mystery. Life is a mystery, but we know who created life, the Lord Jesus Christ. God made life. He is the life giver. In the beginning, God created the.
As far as the biological sense, because also there was this question of evolution, I will tell you as a scientist and a synthetic chemist, if anybody should be able to understand evolution, if anybody should be able to understand evolution, it is me. Because I make molecules for a living. And I don't just buy a kit and mix this and get that. I mean, ab initio, I make molecules. I understand how hard it is to make molecules. I understand that if I take nature's toolkit, it can be much easier because all the tools are already there, and I just mix it in the proportions that, and I do it under these conditions. But ab initio is very, very hard. I don't understand evolution, and I will confess that to you. Is it okay for me to say that I don't understand this? Is that all right? I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't understand anything about organic synthesis, but they understand evolution. I understand a lot about making molecules. I don't understand evolution. And you would say that, wow, I must be really unusual. Let me tell you what goes on in the back rooms of science. With National Academy members, with Nobel Prize winners, I have sat with them. And when I get them alone, not in public, because it's a scary thing if you say what I just said. And I say, do you understand all of this, where all of this came from and how this happens? Every time that I have sat with people who are synthetic chemists who understand this, they go, nope. These people are just so far off on how they believe this stuff came together. I have sat with National Academy members and Nobel Prize winners. Sometimes I will say, do you understand this? And if they're afraid to say yes, they say nothing. They just stare at me because they can't sincerely do it. I was once brought in by the dean of the department once, and many years ago, and he was a chemist, and he was kind of concerned about some things. I said, let me ask you something. You're a chemist. Do you understand this? How do you get DNA without a cell membrane? And how do you get a cell membrane without a DNA? And how does all this come together from this? He said, Jim, we have no idea. We have no idea. I said, isn't it interesting that you, the dean of science, and I, the chemistry professor, can talk about this quietly in your office, but we can't go out there and talk about this? If you understand evolution, I am fine with that. I'm not going to try to change you, not at all. In fact, I wish I had the understanding that you have. But about 7 or 8 years ago, I posted on my website that I don't understand. And I said, I will buy lunch for anyone that will sit with me and explain to me evolution, and I won't argue with you until I don't understand something. I will ask you to clarify. But you can't wave by and say, this enzyme does that. You got to get down in the details of where molecules are built for me. Nobody has come forth. The Atheist Society contacted me. The Atheist Society contacted me. They said that they will buy the lunch. And they challenged the Atheist Society, go down to Houston, have lunch with this guy, and talk to him. Nobody's come. Now remember, because I'm just going to ask when I stop understanding what you're talking about, I will ask. So I sincerely want to know. I would like to believe it, but I just can't. Now, I understand microevolution. I really do. We do this all the time in the lab. I understand this. But when you have speciation changes, when you have organs changing, when you have to have concerted lines of evolution all happening in the same place in time, not just one line, concerted lines, all in the same place, all in the same environment. This is very hard to fathom. I was in Israel not too long ago talking with a bioengineer. And he was describing to me the ear. And he was studying the different changes in the modulus of the ear. And I said, how does this come about? He says, oh, Jim, we all believe in evolution, but we have no idea how it happened. There's a good Jewish professor for you. I mean, that's what it is. So that's where I am. Have I answered the question?
In your nano...
What do you consider to be the best evidence for evolution?
What Darwin considered to be the best evidence for what he called descent with modification in 1859 is still probably the most important evidence today. It's the pattern of classification, the similarities and dissimilarities among all living things. They virtually all have the same genetic code, but then they split into categories. You have human beings within the class, within the group of primates, within the mammal class, within the vertebrate subphylum, within the animal kingdom, within the eukaryote, the super kingdom, you might say. That this suggests, to a certain kind of imagination at any rate, the notion that there were common ancestors that define each group. All mammals had a common ancestor with the characteristic that defines the class of mammals, and that they have inherited that characteristic. So if you think then that they had a more distant common ancestor that from which all vertebrates inherited the backbone, then this logically explains why these features exist, so that it makes evolution or descent with modification a very attractive hypothesis, so attractive that Darwin said that it would convince him that his theory was true even if all the other evidence were against him. Now there's a flaw in this whole system, at least more than one flaw in fact. One is that the hypothesis was taken to be true simply because of its logical and imaginative appeal without checking it out against the evidence, like the fossil evidence. It was a hypothesis that was imposed upon the evidence rather than that was tested by the evidence. Now the other thing that's very interesting about this view of things is that the features that create the classification, such as hair or fur in mammals, are called homologies. They're supposed to be inherited from a common ancestor. But in fact, in a great many cases, the homologies are traceable to different parts in the embryo and to different genes. So, in short, the animals get them by an entirely different route, and this is strongly inconsistent with the common ancestry hypothesis to explain them. It's also a well-known fact among embryologists, but it never comes out to the general public because, well, it's so unpalatable a fact and so difficult to explain on Darwinian theory.
Without which human or any life could not exist.
Dr. A. Cressy Morrison, past president of the New York Academy of Sciences, said, "So many essential conditions are necessary for life to exist on our earth that it is mathematically impossible that all of them could exist in proper relationship by chance." Sir Fred Hoyle, professor of astronomy and mathematics, Oxford University, said, "To suppose that the first cell originated by chance is like believing that a tornado could sweep through a junkyard filled with airplane parts and form a Boeing 747.
What do these quotes mean? They mean the science of probability proves evolution to be an impossibility. The more statistically improbable a thing is, the less we can believe it happened by blind chance. Chance, therefore, has no chance of playing any part in creation.
The design of life may also be described in terms of information. The scientific name is called specified complexity. Specified complexity can be described as the information content of any arrangement and its size in bits of the shortest algorithm, computer program, or code required to generate that arrangement. The data at the core of life is found in the DNA molecules of each living thing. Since its discovery in 1953, human DNA has been decoded, which has incredibly revealed that DNA molecules actually store, carry, and possess information, some 3 billion genetic letters, in the form of a 4-character digital code. DNA has the same relevant properties as an astoundingly complex language. A genetic language, such as our human bodies retained, must be designed and created. It is not rational to consider any other explanation. Yet, somehow, according to evolutionists, contrary to all evidence and reason, the amazingly complex genetic information found in each cell of our and every living thing's makeup is not designed and created. I would only ask, could the Microsoft software program we use for this program be produced by evolution? I doubt if Billy Gates would accept that idea, since his company designed and produced the software. He probably wants to get paid for this product, since even evolutionists might admit that the Microsoft Word program just didn't appear out of thin air or arise from the elements that made up a CD-ROM and over time randomly formed Microsoft Word.
To believe that a CD-ROM could evolve over billions of years from various elements in the earth is crazy, because it is impossible. But to believe that the computer program in the CD-ROM could evolve is insane.
Werner Gitt, a professor of information systems, put it directly, quote, "It has never been shown that a coding system and semantic information could originate by itself through matter. The information theorems predict that this will never be possible. A purely material origin of life is thus ruled out," unquote. When one considers life, one must realize that life consists of infinite complexity, and because of this fact, life must have been created by an
If Darwinian theory is such a poor theory, why don't more scientists reject it?
There are two reasons why more scientists don't reject it. One is that if they did, they would lose all of their prestige within science. They would never get another research grant. And if they didn't have academic tenure, they'd get fired. There is a system of thought control over this, which is extremely rigid. It's worth your professional life. That's another reason why an outsider has to be the one to challenge this. So that's reason number one. There's an enforcement mechanism. And even senior people are frightened about it, and they'll tell you if you get them aside where they don't think they're being overheard. The second reason is ideological. The great problem is that if Darwinism isn't true, science doesn't know what is true. You see, if the microevolution explanation isn't extrapolated to explain all of creation, then they don't know how it could have happened, and that's intolerable. All of the philosophers of science that are writing for the modern era have explained that science doesn't like to have no answer. You see, they will prefer to stick with an inadequate paradigm or general theory rather than to say, well, we just don't know what it is, because then they don't have any place to start proposing experiments, drafting proposals for research grants, and so on. So they'll stick with the false theory if the only alternative is no theory at all, and that's the situation that they're in.